Welcome, one and all. I am Josh Rivers, and this is kind of a shame. Because up until now, even though I have had my criticisms of the games I've been discussing, I feel that the videos I've done have been largely positive. But sadly, a game's not always worth mentioning because of something good. There's been some conversation on the Indie Haven podcast as to whether or not Warframe is an indie game, because it was all any of us had been playing that week and we wanted to see if we could get away with talking about it. And if you go by the literal definition, then yeah, it is an indie game. It's developed and published by the same people, without the assistance of any of the industry's big-name publishers. But for as open and shut as the question kind of was on paper, there was something that was stopping us from just outright calling it an indie game. Because something about it just didn't feel accurate. Something was off. It just felt a little too AAA. I wouldn't be able to put my finger on what exactly that meant until much later. But now that I have, I feel somewhat obliged to do this video. Even though, to be honest, I kind of don't want to. Because I honestly don't know how much of what I'm about to highlight was deliberate. Although frankly, with this many items on the docket, it would almost be more alarming to hear that it wasn't. It started when I found out that Warframe gives its players limited inventory slots, and you have to buy more using Platinum, the game's premium currency. I may have found this out because I accidentally bought one while mindlessly clicking through the game's crafting system. Anywho, this struck me as kind of a weird decision. Limited inventory slots means if you craft a new weapon or Warframe and it turns out you don't like how it plays, it's pretty much just taking up space. And if you get rid of it to free up that inventory slot again, you've basically wasted all of the resources you put into crafting that item. This makes crafting new equipment a risk. I guess it also makes buying new equipment a risk, but at least if you buy stuff with Platinum it comes with an extra inventory slot. Cause it kind of has to, I mean it'd be bloody cheeky if it didn't. But if you're trying not to spend money, it's definitely a risk. And I don't get why you would fill your game with so many different Warframes, all with unique abilities and such a wide array of different weapons, and then do something like this, which actively discourages experimentation. Unless, of course, you were trying to strong-arm players into buying inventory slots. Indeed, quests alone give you blueprints for more Warframes than you can actually have in your inventory. And so if you didn't buy more slots, you'd feel like you were leaving content on the table. No, I'm overthinking it. The game's been out for years, of course it's going to have added more content. That's how games like these keep themselves going, it's how they keep people interested. It's just good practice. The stuff I just said about inventory slots probably didn't even cross their minds. Yeah, you only start out with 2 Warframe slots in a game that currently has 34 different Warframes. Or 54 if you count Prime variants. But you know, from the perspective of the people designing all of this stuff, it's an easy enough detail to overlook. Chances are they just didn't make the connection. Didn't really think about it. Yeah, that makes sense. And then I saw the rest of it. When you get into it, there really are a staggering number of ways Warframe tries to get money from you. Probably the most hilariously stingy of these methods is colour palettes. In a lot of games with character customization, colour would operate on a slider that encompasses pretty much the entirety of the visual spectrum. Not in Warframe. You get colour palettes. Colour palettes that you can buy for money. And in fact, you don't even get the standard colour palette for free. Not all of it. You get 1/5 of the standard colour palette. The most garish 5th. And the reason I find this so funny is that it means you don't get black and white as default. black and white are premium items. I could understand it if they were selling palettes with some kind of metallic finish or pearlescent finish or something with some kind of fancy visual effect attached. That takes effort. That's something I can understand having to pay extra for. Not bloody yellow. What, I don't get yellow? I can have sand colour, or I can have this unripe banana looking tone, but not just a normal yellow. Are you having a bubbly bath, sunshine? Then from hilarious we move on to insidious. There are quests in the game that make you go to the marketplace, where Warframe sells all of its premium items. In fact, Warframe's very first quest is guilty of this. You have to buy a blueprint for a thing to get another thing off your leg, because it's trying to burrow into your brain. But then why would you put it on the leg? That's literally the furthest it could have been from the brain. Look, it's weird. Point is, the game is very openly pointing you in the direction of the marketplace from moment one, and it made for a somewhat disconcerting first impression, given that up to that point I'd only ever heard Warframe talked about as some sort of paragon of ethics. Speaking of ethics, there's loot boxes in the game. Well, sort of. To be honest, I actually like Warframe's relic system as opposed to your standard Overwatch-style loot boxes, because there's only a handful of possible rewards you can get from any given relic, and the game tells you up front what those rewards are. Not only that, but the game even gives you an indication of what the odds are of getting each of the possible rewards from the relic, something that Overwatch doesn't even do in countries where it's a legal bloody requirement. And in fact, you can even upgrade the relics using a grindable resource to improve your chances of getting the rarest stuff. All in all, I do think it's a better version of that system. However, it is undermined somewhat by the presence of these things called relic packs, packs containing 3 random relics with one being a guaranteed rare. And while there is at least that guarantee that there will be a rare one in there, you still don't know what relics you're getting, you still don't know if they're going to have a chance of giving you something you actually want, and they are available in the marketplace for platinum. That's right, it's basically a loot box full of loot boxes, and Digital Extremes seems perfectly happy to give you these in exchange for real money. And while it is easy enough to acquire relics in-game for free, I feel it'd be wise to bear in mind that they still put that glorified gambling system in there and are still perfectly happy to accept your money in exchange for loot boxes within loot boxes. And especially now, with audience distaste towards loot boxes having grown so much that even EA and Warner Brothers had to walk their shit back, their presence in this marketplace is at best puzzling, and at worst, kind of worrying. Especially worrying considering Digital Extremes has admitted in an interview that Warframe has had problems with paid RNG stuff before. In Warframe, you can be accompanied on missions by a cubrow, a little space dog friend, and once upon a time you could pay a bit of platinum and it would randomly change the space dog's fur pattern and coloration. So first of all, why did you do that? Why did you put that in the game? Why did you make a character customization system that was tied exclusively to RNG? Paid RNG, no less. Why did you make it different from customizing the Warframes in the first place? Why did the space dogs need a separate system? And why did it have to be this? I mean, can you imagine if that's how Warframe customization worked? Can you imagine someone trying to get away with making customization for the player character work like that? Oh wait. Anyway, eventually the inevitable happened and someone pressed the button 200 times and spent a ludicrous amount of money on this random system. Of course they did. I know no one likes Captain Hindsight, but I feel like stories of kids stealing their parents' credit cards to spend a king's ransom on FIFA packs were old news even before this game launched. Personally, I kind of struggle to believe anyone deep enough into games to be making them for a living wouldn't have known this was a possibility. But I'll go with it. People make mistakes. Maybe this was just an honest mistake. Seems obvious now in retrospect, didn't at the time. Fair enough. So why are you still selling random packs now, after that incident? Why are you still trying to justify selling random packs in interviews, knowing that there is precedent set in this game for it being incredibly problematic? Is this a lesson you're gonna have to learn with every item on your storefront individually? Does someone need to buy 200 mod packs before you'll make the connection? Because I'd argue by that point it's already too late. Something like this happening once, I can just about believe is an innocent mistake. But if you let that happen again, it will categorically be your fault. Because I refuse to believe you do not know full well what you are doing at this point. Because if nothing else, you seem aware enough of what you're doing to want to preemptively defend it in interviews by saying that people don't have to buy them, you can earn it all in-game. You know, the same line every company always uses whenever they put this shit in their game. And at the risk of beating a dead horse, if you didn't want people to buy them, why are you bloody selling them? I just looked at the product descriptions for the mod packs and they all literally say roll the dice. Fucking hell, Warframe. Anyway, talking of stuff the game sells you, there are 3 particular crafting resources in the game. Neurodes, neural sensors, and orokin cells. All of them quite rare, all of them used in crafting a lot. These 3 resource types tend to be the main barriers to crafting anything of note, particularly in the early game when you don't yet have access to planets where you can grind orokin cells and neural sensors. And it would seem the developers know this, because for these 3 resources, and these 3 resources alone, you can spend 100 platinum on reusable blueprints that will allow you to craft these resources out of other, easier to get resources. Isn't that nice of them? How thoughtful of them to address this problem by giving you more opportunities to give them money, as opposed to, I don't know, making the resources easier to get, making the crafting system less dependent on those 3 resources. Look, I'll freely admit I'm no game designer, okay, but I feel like there were solutions to this problem that didn't involve your players' wallets. And so I feel like maybe it says something about your design philosophy that this is the solution you went with. I mean, after all, we are talking about the same people who put the bloody Dungeon Keeper mobile thing in the crafting system. Yep, that's in there. As if farming the crafting materials didn't cost the player enough time already, you've also got to wait for the item to be built. And of course you can pay platinum to skip the wait, we all know the drill. If you don't want to pay the fee, then depending on what you're crafting, you could find yourself waiting anywhere between 12 hours and 3 days! 3 days! Are you having my ass? That's for the Warframes, the playable characters. They take 3 days to craft. And actually, to craft a Warframe, you need that Warframe's corresponding systems, chassis, and neuroptics, which also have to be crafted, and each take 12 hours to finish building. So if we ignore the time it takes to gather the crafting materials in the first place, because as I said earlier, that takes a hot minute, and if we ignore the time it takes to track down the blueprints for the systems, the chassis, and the neuroptics, and we look only at the time spent waiting for the crafting itself to be done, you're still looking at a minimum of 3.5 days. 84 hours. That's the minimum. Yeah. Now, I guess, on balance, that this isn't as egregious as stuff like Dungeon Keeper Mobile, in as much as there is a whole rest of the game that you can play in the meantime. But for God's sake, why is this in here? What reason is there for this to be in the game if not purely to erode the player's patience, to wear a hole in their pocket, to carve another entrance into their bank account? There's just no other reason to do it. And if there is another reason, then why can I pay to get around it? Look, I get it. It's a free-to-play game. It's gotta make its money somewhere. But you're already selling us the weapons and the warframes and the helmets and the capes and the pauldrons and the spacecrafts and the decorations for your spacecraft. And your Prime Access packs, of course, some of which can go up to 60 quid, £60 sterling. And that stuff I'm fine with. I can accept a free-to-play game doing that. I mean, personally, I do think that 60 quid's a bit much for what's actually in the pack, especially given that you can buy entire other games for that money. But that's a matter of personal opinion, and I don't have a problem with you selling that, because it is a free-to-play game, and it does need to make money. I don't have a problem with you making money. My problem is that you're doing all of it. The access packs, the cosmetics, the colour palettes, the inventory slots, the mod packs, the 3 days, the blueprints, the quests that surreptitiously lead you to the marketplace, the loot boxes within loot boxes. Many of the things I just said would be dodgy enough on their own. There are games that have been slated for doing 1 or 2 things on that list, and Warframe has all of it. And it's not even an exhaustive list of how Warframe makes its money. Yeah, the game's free to play, but who the hell decided all of this was a fair trade-off? It's excessive to the point of feeling almost desperate. It's just cloyingly grasping. And it's being cheered on as some sort of ethical revelation. And I don't get it. Now, you may be watching this video and you may be listening to what I'm saying and you may be thinking, Josh, there's an important detail that you haven't addressed. You don't have to spend money to get platinum. You can get platinum through player trading. Well, I'm glad that you hypothetically brought that up, because that brings us to what for me might have been the biggest indicator that there was something wrong with this picture. Here's the thing. You can try and get platinum through player trading, but everyone's trying to get platinum through player trading. The recent explosion in Warframe's popularity means that the supply of tradable items now far exceeds the demand, and various forum posts from community members suggest that this has caused the market to become quite unstable, with the average sale value for Prime parts starting relatively high as they're added to the game, and then gradually plummeting the longer that they're out as more relics are opened and more of those parts enter the market. Added to that is the fact that once platinum has been traded, it then cannot be traded again. Players cannot trade platinum that they themselves have not paid money for. So if you get platinum in a trade, you can't use it in any subsequent trades. That platinum can now only be spent in the game's marketplace, or one of the many portals to it. And this forces platinum out of the economy. Because while being able to trade for platinum is a nice idea, the reality of it is if it became its own self-sufficient little ecosystem, nobody would spend money on the game. And you might think, well, surely you can still trade items for other items. No. If you've not got platinum, people aren't interested. Because if you think about it, why would they trade for other items? As proponents of Warframe are so fond of pointing out, you can grind for the items. You can't grind for platinum. And platinum is the only thing in the game that can remove the limitations that have been placed on your experience. Only platinum can get you more inventory slots. Only platinum can get you the rest of the colour palettes. Only platinum can get you the vast majority of cosmetic items, which is understandable in the case of the Tenogen stuff, because those items were designed by community members, and money from the sale of those items quite rightly goes to their designers because it's their work. So it'd be pretty dodgy if the developer started giving those away for free. But the fact remains that if you're trying not to spend money, your options for character customization are virtually non-existent, unless you go to Barrow Key Tier, who does have the odd cosmetic item here and there available for currencies you can earn in-game. So you could wait for him, and hope it's not going to be too long before he shows up again. And hope that when he does show up, it's on a planet you've actually unlocked. And hope that in his ever-changing lineup of wares is something that you actually want. and then hope that you can afford it. See, you've got options. We're not strong-arming you. You don't have to spend one thin dime. This fucking game. So yeah, Platinum opens doors. Doors that you can't open with anything else. And of course it does, it's gotta be desirable. But Platinum is so omnipresent in Warframe, it goes beyond desirable and starts to feel necessary if you don't want your experience to be palpably lesser. So if you're told you can trade for Platinum, why would you settle for anything that wasn't Platinum? But the only people with Platinum they can trade are people who spend money on the game. Thing is, though, the people who spend money on the game, chances are they've already got a bunch of cool stuff, because they've spent money on the game. Which begs the question, what happens when the people with the money have everything they want? Or at the very least, everything you're in a position to offer them? Well, this happens. Demand plummets, the value of goods depreciates drastically, and the people who were told they could get Platinum without spending money either succumb to bitter disappointment, or desperately start going after scraps. I've set up shop in the bazaar a couple of times, and one thing I've learned is that when someone comes up to you asking to start a trade, it doesn't mean they're interested in buying anything. People will just come up to you, thrust items in your face and demand Platinum. There was one interaction in particular that rang alarm bells for me. A player came up to me and said, "Look, I've not got a lot to sell, but I desperately need Platinum. Could you maybe let me sell you this stuff?" Now, I've never spent money on the game, because I've never felt 100% like it's been my choice to do so. So the only Platinum I've ever had is the Platinum they give you for free at the start of the game, to give you a sense of investment in the game's premium economy, cause fuck it, we've done every other trick in the book, what's one more? And because I hadn't actually bought that Platinum, it turned out I couldn't even trade that. Not having realised that yet, I told the other player, "Look, you're wasting your time, I've only got like 3 Platinum left." To which they responded, "That's fine, I'll take it." Now, let's be clear, 3 Platinum gets you nothing. It gets you a fraction of nothing. But it's still Platinum and people will take what they can get. I have seen someone literally begging for Platinum, and they had to be talked down by another player who pointed out that they had tried the same thing and it didn't work. So not only has Warframe's economy apparently created virtual beggars, but it's also apparently created so many they are now bumping into each other. Now, is it me, or is that not healthy? And you can blame the players, you can question their judgment, I'm sure many of you will. But the fact of the matter is, this is the desired effect. People are supposed to want Platinum, they're supposed to want it so much that they'll pay for it. But not everybody can. Not everyone wants to, not everyone can justify that purchase to themselves. And those people were told it wouldn't matter. Almost everybody I've seen praising Warframe has talked about player trading and how you can get Platinum without spending money. And that might have been true once upon a time, it might technically still be true now. But who are we kidding? For most of us, it's not gonna happen. And I feel bad for the people who were drawn to this game with promises to the contrary, who came to Warframe in good faith only to discover that their premium currency is just as pervasive as in any other game. And the thing that was supposed to mitigate that simply doesn't work. And for the record, I don't think Warframe's the first game to induce that kind of feeling of desperation. Having that effect on people is just a standard feature of the free-to-play economy as we know it. But Warframe in particular has created the perfect environment to see it clearly firsthand. And that's all I can see now. A game that drives people to begging. And I don't want to see it that way. Maybe it's just because I'm still playing the game and I want to believe that that's for more reasons than just addiction-based gameplay loops causing me to develop a habit. But as I said way back at the beginning of this video, I'm still not entirely convinced that everything bad that I'm seeing is a deliberate feature. By their own admission, this was Digital Extremes' first stab at making a game like this, so inexperience would be an understandable explanation. I mean, it has been 5 years since the game launched, but the point still more or less stands. And they have done things here and there in those 5 years that I feel like you wouldn't do unless you genuinely cared. The whole Tenogen thing, giving talented community members a platform to make money from their artistic work. The way they took a funny little glitch that the community seemed to really enjoy and made it an actual part of the gameplay that does kind of transform the experience. That's the side of Warframe I want to believe in. I want to believe all that good stuff is the real Warframe, and that all of the problematic things that I'm seeing are just some horrible accident. But that's a lot of stuff for me to have to dismiss as accidental. And I honestly don't think I would even consider dismissing it had I not heard so many people I respect talk so highly of the game. Would I be considering the possibility that this is ethical free-to-play had I not been told it was before I saw the game? I don't think I would, because it's just a minefield of problems. And while they have fixed some of the problems, it feels like they're only fixing the problems that get too big for them to ignore. The stuff that gets too much attention, the stuff with 2+ years of community bricklaying, as they put it. Or anything that comes with a specific case study attached that someone could point to and say, this is causing problems, why is it still in the game? Addressing only the things that they can't afford not to, leaving other similarly problematic elements intact, at least for as long as they continue to fly under the radar. At least that's the impression I get based on what I've seen. And while I obviously can't know for certain, I feel it's fair to ask the question, are these people really champions of the community, or are they just smart? Do they just realise that they can't survive the same shitstorms that EA and Activision Blizzard invite every other week? Is this free-to-play done right? Or is it merely free-to-play that understands what it can and can't get away with? And I hate that I can't help but think of it that way, because that's not how this story was supposed to go. This was supposed to be the inspiring tale of the people behind Dark Sector breaking away from the AAA machine and finally making the game they wanted to make. This was their baby. I don't want to look upon it with such cynicism. But when there's this much shit I can point to, what else am I supposed to think? There's been some discussion on the Indie Haven podcast about whether or not Warframe is an indie game, and I think I finally understand what was stopping all of us from saying outright that it was. It's because indie isn't really defined by its literal definition, it's defined by a culture, and that culture simply doesn't mesh with something this capitalist. I mean, I'm sure some of you are rolling your eyes at that, but I really don't know how better to put it. It feels like a product of capitalism. Too much focus on how can we make money and not enough thought given to the consequences. Digital Extremes may have left the AAA machine, but it seems as though the AAA machine hasn't left Digital Extremes. They might not be as bad as EA, they might not have the same seedy intentions as Warner Brothers or Activision Blizzard, but they're using the same tactics. And whether they meant it to or not, they're clearly having the same effect. To me, the difference between indie and AAA is the difference between making money by selling your work and employing monetization strategies. There's a line beyond which it stops being about viability, it stops being about need, and it becomes about what you can get away with, how much you can extract from people. And as near as I can tell, Warframe has jumped over that line with both feet, because I simply don't believe that Warframe needed to do this. Certainly not all of it. And if you're saying it is necessary, that this is what Warframe needs to do just to be viable, if this is the only way it can survive, then I'm sorry, but personally I just don't think it's worth it. No one game could ever be worth that much bollocks. The game might be good, the game might be brilliant, but I can't recommend it to people, because I know the game's going to subject them to a thorough psychological beatdown, and I would feel like it'd be partially my fault for introducing them to it. At the end of the day, I just want this game to do right by its players. I just want to be able to recommend Warframe to people without feeling like I'm offering up their wallets on a silver platter. And right now, I can't. Anyway, just thought that was worth mentioning. And I finally understand what stopped us outright from saying it fuck. You heard me.